Hello, friends. Tonight, we move into a gentle historical tale, the kind that settles the mind and quiets the noise of the day. You drift into a dim Bronze Age workshop, somewhere between a smoky twilight and the first hints of night, where the glow of slow-burning furnaces flickers like half-awake fire spirits. These ancient potters learned to manage slow furnace temperatures with a kind of patience that feels almost mythical in your modern ears. Though, to be fair, if you were suddenly transported into their world, you probably wouldn't survive the first hour, mostly because no one here believes in safety instructions. Still, they move with a steady rhythm, as if the warm light cushioning the walls has taught them how to breathe more slowly. While the night softens around you, feel free to like and subscribe. Only if these gentle stories make your evenings easier. And if you're listening from somewhere far away, share your location and your local time below. It's always lovely seeing this sleepy little community glow across the map, like embers in a hearth. Now ease the lights down, let the calm settle across your room, and follow me quietly into the story. You step under the low lintel of the workshop, ducking just enough to notice a faint bronze amulet hanging near the kiln entrance. It twists lazily in the faint draft, catching the firelight in small, wobbly reflections. No one seems to know which potter hung it there, though one apprentice whispers that it used to belong to a traveling trader who insisted it brought good cooling luck. Another worker mutters that the trader just forgot it and someone fancied the decoration. Historians still debate whether such charms held symbolic meaning, or whether they were, essentially, the Bronze Age version of sticking a lucky magnet on your fridge. The furnace crackles softly beside you, its warmth brushing the side of your face like a cat that has decided you deserve moderate affection. These kilns, unlike the roaring modern ones, burn slowly and steadily. The potters of this region, deep within the Bronze Age landscapes of the Near East, had mastered the art of coaxing temperature rather than forcing it. They believed heat should be persuaded, not controlled. One artisan even claims he can hear the kiln breathe when the temperature shifts, tilting his head like a bird trying to identify a distant whisper. You nod sympathetically, because even if you can't hear a furnace exhale, you appreciate the dedication. Gentle humor drifts through the workshop like pale smoke. A potter nearby grumbles that slow kiln firing is like trying to babysit a sleepy goat. It seems calm until it isn't, and then suddenly it decides to rebel for no reason. Another mutters that if they ever discover a way to measure heat accurately, the gods will probably take offense at humans trying to be too clever. A third adds that the last time someone tried improving the process, they nearly turned a week's worth of bowls into something resembling melted pancakes. You can't help smiling at the thought. Bronze Age pancakes, made of clay and disappointment. The room carries a warm amber glow, settling softly on shelves of drying vessels arranged like silent audience members. You brush your fingers lightly along a pot's rim, feeling its faint grit and cool. And immediately, a young apprentice hurries over to whisper that touching the pots before firing might confuse their spirit. You apologize, though you're not entirely sure whether their spirit refers to the pot's integrity or the apprentice's personal preferences. Somewhere in the corner, two potters debate whether clay remembers the hands that shaped it. One swears the vessel carries the imprint of mood as much as motion. The other insists that's nonsense, though his soft voice betrays a hint of belief he refuses to admit. Outside, the last threads of daylight fade, filtering through reeds and wooden slats. Inside, the atmosphere hums gently with a soft fireplace crackling, the muted shuffle of sandals on packed earth, and the faint, almost musical clinking of tools. the world slows down without asking your permission. Your breath naturally follows its pace. You stand closer to the furnace now, watching the slow, wavering orange within it. Slow temperature management in the Bronze Age required a mixture of skill, intuition, and pure stubbornness. They monitored heating phases the way you might monitor a simmering soup, by subtle changes in smell and color, by observing how flames curled around stacked vessels. One potter insists that watching the glow between the clay stacks is better than any future invention could ever be. Another claims that if the fire pops 3 times in a row, it's a sign the kiln is just being dramatic. You make no sudden moves. You simply observe, feeling the light play across your skin, soft and warm and steady. Someone passes by, offering a bowl of warm barley tea, the closest thing this workshop has to workplace perks. You accept, though you're warned not to drink too fast, or you'll be mistaken for someone eager to help shovel clay. You assure them you prefer a more observational role. A gentle shift in the fire's tone, almost like the quiet sigh of a sleepy animal, draws every potter's gaze. They exchange knowing looks, reading the sound like a shared language. One touches the bronze amulet at the entrance, as if acknowledging an old friend. Another leans closer to inspect the faint change in hue, muttering about how heat always has its own mood on chilly evenings. As you settle deeper into the glow and the soft warmth of the furnace, the simple truth of Bronze Age craftsmanship unfolds around you. Patience was the ultimate tool. Steadier than a chisel, more reliable than a lucky charm. And here, in this quiet glow of clay and firelight, you feel that same patience beginning to settle gently across your thoughts. You wake slowly into the pale hush of dawn, the Bronze Age workshop softened by a cool mist creeping in through the gaps in the wooden slats. The world feels quieter now, as if the night itself, satisfied with its watch, has stepped aside to let the morning take your hand. Rows of half-formed clay vessels surround you, bowls, jars, and rounded pots balanced on wooden boards, each one holding the imprint of a craftsman's care. You drift among them, breathing in the gentle scent of damp earth as sunlight brushes the room in thin, gold-edged sheets. Your thumb finds the slight dent you left in a damp clay bowl the night before. Somehow, the little impression has survived untouched, and the apprentice who scolded you now seems to have forgotten the offense entirely. He walks past with half-lidded eyes, talking softly to himself about the day's clay resting schedule, a phrase you never expected to hear spoken with such seriousness. You smile at how profound these routines feel in this world. Like the pottery is a collection of sleepy pets that need their rest before facing the heat. One potter, already kneeling beside a mound of fresh clay, pats the earth with gentle, steady motions. He presses both palms firmly into the surface, tilting his head as though listening to a distant hum below the floor. He claims the earth can tell him if today's firing will be smooth or fussy. Another potter mutters that such intuition is nonsense, though his eyes flick toward the ground, as though he secretly wishes the soil would whisper something useful to him too. Historians still debate whether kiln success in this era truly involved such rituals, or whether people simply enjoyed adding a bit of mystical flair to their workdays. You crouch beside a worker smoothing a vessel's rim with slow, circular movements, the clay soft beneath their fingertips. They guide your hand to follow theirs, letting you feel the subtle pull of moisture and weight. The tactile anchor of this moment envelops you. The cool pliability, the faint grit, the gentle resistance. It's the kind of sensation that makes your own thoughts feel calmer, as if shaped into soft, rounded edges. A few jokes drift across the space, carried lazily on the early morning forest breeze drifting in from outside. One apprentice insists clay has moods just like people. Too wet in its sulks, Too dry, and it becomes stubborn. Another worker teases him, asking whether the bowl he destroyed yesterday was simply in a bad emotional state. A third adds that the only moody thing in this workshop is the senior potter who didn't get enough sleep. You snort softly, earning a quiet grin from the apprentice nearest you, who confides that humor is as important as water when working clay this early. Farther down the workshop, a potter presses his fingertips into a fresh slab, checking the readiness by the depth and softness of each print. He explains, in a tone as gentle as the dawn, that managing slow furnace temperatures begins long before any fire is lit. The clay's exact texture determines when the first heat should be introduced. Too much moisture and vessels may crack from steam pressure. Too little, and they weaken before the firing even begins. It's the Bronze Age equivalent of checking your bread dough. Except the consequences involve days of lost labor and a fair bit of disappointment. The dust rises in faint curls as tools scrape gently across shaping boards. You hear the shuffle of people preparing clay coils, the low hum of a potter humming a tune you suspect is at least 1,000 years old, and the rhythmic pat-pat-pat of hands working material into readiness. The early morning forest breeze slips across your cheek again, carrying the scent of dew-covered leaves from outside the workshop. You can almost see the treetops shifting, just barely, like sleepy guardians waking with the potters. Someone gestures for you to help carry a board stacked with soft bowls. You lift it carefully, feeling its weight and the slight wobble of moist clay. A worker jokes that your cautious pace makes you look like someone transporting a tray of pastries they're afraid to drop. Another adds that pastries probably weren't invented yet, not in this region, at least. So you'd better just imagine carrying a tray of prehistoric snacks, which sounds far less appetizing. You try not to laugh, afraid your movement might shake the bowls from their neatly arranged positions. As you set the board down beside the furnace chamber, a potter inspects each vessel, studying your thumbprint with mild amusement. It has character, he murmurs, echoing the notion that clay remembers. He doesn't scold you. Instead, he traces his own fingerprint beside yours, suggesting that maybe vessels shaped by many different hands might turn out even stronger. It's an idea historians still interpret differently. Some argue potters preferred to work individually, while others believe communal shaping was common. The morning brightens further, and the workers begin shifting tools, arranging them according to tasks that unfold with calm predictability. A stone paddle here, a wooden rib there, each object telling its own small story of a culture that built its world with touch and patience. You notice again how these craftspeople rarely rush. Everything is deliberate, unhurried. Even their jokes feel like they drift rather than leap. Before long, the workshop moves toward the next phase, warming the clay through gentle sun exposure before the first kiln session. The potters carry vessels outside to a patch of level ground, where rays of soft gold stretch over the land. As the forest breeze flutters across them, the vessels seem to glow faintly. Someone claims you can tell which pots will fire well based on the way their shadows fall. Another laughs that this is nonsense, but stands watching the shadows anyway. You kneel beside the row of pots and press your palm lightly against one, still feeling the faint echo of the dent you left earlier. You sense the beginning of a long day of careful heat and slow transformation. And all around you, everything is touched by dawn. You move deeper into the workshop's shaded chambers as the sun begins its slow rise, the warmth outside giving way to the cool, earthy dimness of the kiln room. The air here feels thicker, scented with charcoal dust, old smoke, and the faint mineral tang of clay, waiting to become something more. This is where the Bronze Age potters managed the furnace itself, where the true dance of temperature and patience unfolds. Bundles of uneven firewood line the walls, each stack chosen not by size, but by personality, at least according to the workers who swear each type burns with its own temperament. A potter sits cross-legged beside a bundle of oddly twisted firewood, the one you noticed last night, stroking his beard with a seriousness normally reserved for philosophical debates. He claims that certain woods sing at different temperatures, producing subtle shifts in crackle pitch. Another potter snorts, insisting that what he calls singing is just wood being wood, though he admits that some bundles do seem moodier than others. Historians still debate whether potters genuinely used sound as a guide, or whether this was simply a poetic way of describing experience in a world without thermometers. You crouch close as they feed wood into a narrow opening at the base of the kiln. The fire accepts each piece with a muted sigh, pulling it inward. The smell grows richer, earthy, smoky, familiar. You notice how the potters watch every tiny shift. The darkening of a flame's edge, the faint glitter of embers. The way smoke curls toward the ceiling as if mapping its own slow route. One elder motions for you to observe the smoke more closely. A pale trail means we've begun too cool, he murmurs, his voice like worn leather. A thick, wavering one means the fire is thinking too hard. You raise an eyebrow. He chuckles softly, acknowledging the modern confusion behind your expression. Fires think more than you'd expect, he adds, and you accept this as one accepts many things here. Truth shaped by experience rather than instruments. Nearby, a potter sits with a bowl of water, dipping a reed into it and flicking droplets near the kiln's outer surface. He listens for the hiss. The quieter the sound, the cooler the wall. It's a technique simple enough that even your sleep-laden mind understands it. You try a flick yourself, though your droplet lands nowhere near the wall and instead splashes onto the potter's foot. He gives you a flat look before breaking into a small smile. Even the water is sleepy, he jokes. It missed entirely. 3 gentle jokes ripple through the chamber like drifting smoke. Another potter grumbles that slow firing is like raising a child who refuses to grow up on schedule. A younger apprentice insists the kiln listens better if you compliment it. Someone else mutters that he once tried loudly, and the kiln overheated out of pure spite. The room chuckles, the humor soft and unhurried, blending seamlessly with the warmth of the space. You glance toward the bundles of firewood again, the odd twisted pieces set aside from the rest. The elder taps one of them thoughtfully. This wood burns unpredictably, he explains. That makes it perfect for delicate heating. The fire has to work harder to understand it. You're not entirely convinced the fire understands anything, but the potters seem so attuned to these small details that you feel as though the furnace is a living creature, a stubborn, glowing companion they've learned to coax into cooperation. As you watch the flames shift from soft orange to a deeper, more determined glow, the potters begin discussing the next phase, managing the kiln's internal atmosphere. They slide long wooden paddles under the clay vessels to adjust spacing, ensuring heat flows gently between them. Too little space and the vessels suffocate. Too much and the heat escapes too easily. The process is strangely tender, like arranging sleeping children so they rest undisturbed. The smell of burning wood deepens, warm and resinous, settling around you like a blanket. In the half-darkness, the fire flickers against the curved walls of the kiln chamber, painting shadows that sway in slow harmony. The smell wraps around you, steady and comforting, grounding you in this quiet moment of ancient craftsmanship. You lean closer as one potter explains, in a hushed voice, that the smoke color will tell them when to increase airflow. He points at the thin plume rising from a vent high on the kiln. If it shifts to silver gray, we adjust. Another potter argues that color alone isn't reliable, that he can feel the right moment by hovering his hand just above the kiln's outer surface. A third rolls his eyes, saying both are wrong and that the kiln simply whispers when ready. Their debate settles into a warm, familiar grumble, the kind that lacks real conflict and exists only because long work invites long conversations. You take in the entire room, the bundles of odd firewood, the damp clay vessels on the lower shelves waiting for later firing, the slight haze of smoke drifting lazily above, and the potters themselves, calm, patient, committed. Everything here runs on slowness. Even the fire crackles more softly than expected, as if respecting the morning's peaceful pace. A potter turns to you, handing you a small curved stick used for adjusting embers. "Try stirring," he says, guiding your hand with gentle precision. You move the tool slowly, nudging embers aside, watching the sparks shift like tiny wandering stars. The warmth isn't harsh, it's steady, like the quiet heartbeat of the workshop. When you finish, the potter nods approvingly. "The fire listens," he says simply, leaving you to wonder whether that's praise for your technique or another reflection of their world's poetic logic. As the kiln settles into a low, steady burn, the smell of smoke coils around you once more. You stand beside the twisting bundle of special firewood, sensing its importance in this slow-burning secret of Bronze Age pottery. Somewhere behind you, the kiln gives a small, almost thoughtful crackle, like a whispered acknowledgement. And in that moment, the whole chamber feels alive. You step away from the enclosed warmth of the kiln chamber and follow a narrow path leading up a low ridge behind the workshop. The air grows cooler as you walk, brushing gently across your skin with the softness of early morning haze. At the crest of the hill, the landscape opens into a remote firing pit used only for special batches, ceremonial vessels, intricate jars, or pottery whose clay carries unusual mineral streaks. The pit sits within a shallow circle of stones, each one smoothed by countless seasons and nearly swallowed by creeping grasses. Low valley fog rolls through the reeds below, drifting like a patient tide, softening every edge of the world. You breathe in deeply, and the atmosphere settles around you. A blend of chill air, faint smoke from distant hearths, and the grounded stillness that comes from being slightly removed from human bustle. Up here, everything feels quieter, as though the land itself prefers a slow beginning to the day. A potter stands near the pit, adjusting a smooth stone wedge tucked at his belt, the same one you slipped into yours the night before. Offered by a craftsman who said you may find it useful for convincing stubborn vents. You pull it out, running your fingers over its warm, rounded surface. It feels almost thoughtful in your hand, as though carrying the memory of each kiln it helped persuade. The potter grins when he sees you examining it. "This one's an old friend," he whispers. "Stone remembers better than firewood." You don't argue. In a place where clay remembers fingerprints, wood sings, and kilns breathe, it seems perfectly reasonable that stone might keep stories too. The firing pit holds a small number of vessels arranged in a circle, each covered with a simple pottery lid to protect it from ash. You recognize the faint shape of a bowl, whose twin still carries your thumb's dent back in the workshop. These pieces look calmer somehow, as if the gentle sun and valley fog have coaxed them into a patient stillness. The potters begin preparing the pit with slow, deliberate movements. They slide reeds and small twigs into the narrow gaps around the vessels, creating tiny channels for airflow. Then they place larger branches across the top, forming a loose lattice to guide the fire's direction. One worker hands you a bundle of firewood, some of it straight-grained, some twisted like the ones from the workshop. The odd pieces go on the outer ring, he explains, because their unpredictable burn helps regulate the pit's temperature without overheating the core. You help arrange them, though a potter occasionally shifts your placements by mere centimeters, insisting that precision matters even when the work appears humble. Fire appreciates suggestions, not orders, he murmurs, nudging a branch into alignment. His tone is gentle, almost parental. The atmosphere hums with focus, patience, and a quiet respect for the slow art about to unfold. Once the wood is arranged, the potters strike a spark from flint and dried fungus. Flames spread slowly, curling upward with lazy determination. The heat from the pit rises in shimmering layers, barely visible but fully present, like warm breath exhaled by the earth itself. You lean over, feeling the gentle gradient of warmth. Cool at your knees, mild at your waist, comfortable at your chest. It's like standing in front of a quiet tide of heat, each wave almost imperceptibly warmer than the last. The potters crouch around the pit, adjusting the vents, small gaps between stones, using their own stone wedges. You replicate their movements, sliding your wedge under a rock to create a narrow opening. The change is slight, but the potter beside you gives an approving nod. "The fire will thank you," he says. You're not entirely sure it will, but the belief threaded through his voice makes the moment feel sincere. A distant potter begins counting sparks drifting upward from the fire. He does this with theatrical exaggeration, squinting dramatically as though performing some grand ritual. The others burst into restrained laughter. One jokes that he once tried to determine temperature by spark counting too, but abandoned the method when the numbers kept changing every time he blinked. Another claims sparks are just fire's way of telling jokes in tiny bright bursts. The spark counter responds that he'll stop if someone invents a better system. No one does. The valley fog drifts closer, brushing the ridge in low, ghostly sweeps. You can feel droplets of moisture settling lightly on your hair, your clothing, even on the warm stones around the pit. Strangely, the fire doesn't hiss or recoil. It seems to accept the fog's presence as if the two share an old agreement. One potter remarks that firing in mist helps temper the heat more naturally. Another insists the fog simply likes to watch. You don't try to decipher whether this is poetic truth or just early morning humor. The atmosphere shifts subtly as the fire deepens. A faint glow radiates from the pit, warming your hands when you hold them out. The potters check the vessels occasionally by touching the lids with the backs of their fingers. Not enough to disturb them, just enough to sense the temperature rising through the clay. You try it yourself, feeling a warmth that seems to travel slowly upward, like the vessel is sipping heat rather than swallowing it. Your stone wedge sits warm now in your palm. You tuck it carefully back into your belt, aware of how often potters rely on such simple tools to shape the fire's breath. You catch a glimpse of twisted firewood burning unevenly in the outer ring, sending thin streams of smoke drifting sideways. A subtle reminder of how nothing here burns the same way twice. The potters eventually settle into a circle around the pit, sitting cross-legged, letting the fire do its patient work. They fall into soft conversation, half stories, half gentle teasing. One mentions the bronze amulet back in the workshop, claiming it once guided a trader safely through a sandstorm. Another counters that it's more likely the amulet just jingled loudly enough to scare off any trouble. You sit with them, warmed by the fire and wrapped in the muted hush of fog and reeds and ancient craftsmanship. The atmosphere holds you gently, like a blanket woven of heat, mist, and thoughtful silence. Here, with the radiant kiln pit glowing softly at your feet, you feel time slowing to match the rhythm of the Bronze Age itself. Steady, patient, and persistent, night settles quietly across the settlement, weaving itself through reeds, rooftops, and the low workshop walls until everything feels wrapped in a dark, gentle hush. You return from the hillside firing pit with the potters, your stone wedge warm against your hip, and follow them into the open courtyard behind the main kiln. Here, under a sky brushed with soft moonlight, the craftsmen gather for the final ritual of the day, listening to the cooled vessels. The moment you step closer, you hear it. Delicate, fleeting, almost shy. A tiny metallic ping. Then another, softer, like a distant drop of water tapping the rim of a quiet pond. These are the sounds of clay cooling after its long transformation. The pottery releasing tension in thin breaths of sound. The potters call them night whispers. You can't help thinking they sound like secrets the vessels have been holding on to all day. The gentle chorus continues as they arrange finished pieces in a wide circle, each vessel catching a thread of moonlight along its curved surface. One potter kneels beside a jar, placing his ear close enough to hear the faint tremor within. "She's happy," he murmurs. You're not certain happiness is a measurable quality for jars. But the potter seems unconcerned with your doubts. After all, you've now spent enough time with Bronze Age artisans to accept that pots, kilns, firewood, and stone wedges all have personalities of their own. A quiet chuckle rises from a few steps away. An apprentice nudges another, pointing toward the workshop entrance. Hanging in its usual place, the bronze amulet sways gently in the night breeze. Yet tonight, it gleams with a very faint glow, pale and unassuming, but visible enough that even you notice it. The apprentice whispers that the amulet glows most when cooling pottery has been fired at exactly the right pace. Another potter claims this is nonsense, but he keeps glancing toward the amulet anyway. Historians still debate whether such objects were believed to guide craftsmanship, or whether people simply liked having excuses for mysterious little coincidences. The soft riverside night air drifts by, carrying the distant murmur of water moving between reeds. Somewhere, frogs croak with sleepy disinterest, and insects hum in gentle, unhurried halos around patches of torchlight. The atmosphere feels serene, the kind of stillness that comes only after a long day of focused labor. You walk among the pots, listening to the occasional ping, your callback from earlier echoing through the night. One vessel offers a sound so pure and crisp that the potters pause mid-conversation. "That one's perfect," someone announces. Another nods sagely. "You'll never hear that sound again with the same pot. It only sings once." You wonder if this is true or simply poetic exaggeration, but either way, the idea settles comfortably into your mind, adding another soft layer to the night. A potter hands you a small bowl still cooling, its surface warm but firm. You lift it to your ear, not because you expect to hear anything, but because everyone else seems so invested in this ritual. To your surprise, the bowl emits a tiny, delicate click against your palm. You laugh softly, and the potter grins. "See? It knows you," he teases. "Probably recognized your thumbprint from earlier." Another potter overhears and remarks, "The clay is more forgiving than people. Touch something once, and it remembers forever," he says. "Humans forget by morning." Everyone laughs quietly, their voices drifting like soft ripples across the riverside air. Even the frogs seem to add their own commentary, croaking in uneven rhythms as though trying to join the conversation. The workers begin inspecting each vessel, tapping them lightly with bone tools to test for internal cracks. A clear ring means the clay has cooled properly. A dull thud hints at flaws hidden deep within. You watch as they gently turn pots, brush soot from their bottoms, and run fingers along rims with unhurried familiarity. These motions are soft, confident, and rhythmic. Tiny rituals shaped by generations of experience. You kneel beside a jar, noticing a faint mark in its side, almost the shape of a fingerprint. Not yours or anyone's from today, but perhaps from centuries of tradition pressed into imagination. The potter beside you comments that even flawed pieces carry stories. Sometimes a pot with a minor crack holds grain just as well, he whispers. Sometimes it's decoration that matters. Sometimes it's the sound. His voice softens as another ping echoes across the courtyard, like a small bell rung by invisible hands. The moonlight deepens, silvering the edges of the vessels and turning the courtyard into a quiet mosaic of soft highlights and shadowed clay. The glow of the bronze amulet shifts subtly as the breeze pushes it back and forth. You watch its motion, aware of how many times this little charm has threaded its way through your time here. First by the kiln door, then touched by potters, then referenced in the hillside stories, and now glowing faintly above you. One apprentice swears he sees it brighten in sync with each cooling ping. Another rolls his eyes, insisting it's just moonlight. A third suggests maybe the amulet is just happy too. You laugh at how contagious the workshop's gentle superstition has become. Even you feel a fondness for the amulet now, as though it has been keeping quiet watch over your visit. As the night deepens further, the potters settle into slow conversation. Stories of difficult firings, of legendary vessels that supposedly survived decades without cracking, of misunderstandings between potters and their moody clay. They tease each other over past mistakes, boast mildly about perfect firings, and debate good-humoredly about whether a kiln can truly be in a bad mood. The humor is soft, drifting through the riverside air with the same languid ease as the fog from earlier. You sit among them, warmed by the presence of fired clay, cooled air, and the distant, sleepy movement of the river. The sound of the pots, those small metallic pings, comes less frequently now, fading like stars as dawn approaches. The night feels full and peaceful, wrapped in the steady rhythm of ancient craft and quiet accomplishment. The night folds itself gently around you now, softer than before, quieter than anything that has come earlier in this long, ancient journey. The potters have drifted away to their sleeping spaces, the workshop emptied of voices and footsteps, leaving only the faint memory of warmth lingering in the air. The kiln rests too, cooling in slow, deep breaths, like some old creatures settling into dreams of embers and clay. You step out into the open courtyard one last time. The moon hangs steady above the reeds, pouring pale silver across the earth in long, quiet strokes. Nothing moves except a small breeze that glides across your skin, light as a fingertip. Even the river nearby flows in near silence, its surface smooth and unbothered, carrying the reflection of stars in a slow drifting path. The pottery that sang earlier lies in calm rows now, each vessel cool to the touch, each shape casting a softened shadow. The last faint ping has long faded, leaving the air still and even. You take a moment to breathe it all in, the cooling earth beneath your feet, the soft scent of distant smoke, the tender hush of the landscape resting between one day and the next. Far off toward the hills, the fog begins to gather again, drifting low and gentle across the ground, folding into the valley like a settling blanket. It moves without hurry, without weight, a quiet tide of softness that seems to dim even the moonlight as it passes. You watch it for a while, letting its slow rhythm become your own. The world here is calm, deep, unbroken. Each breath comes easier. Each thought grows quieter. The night holds you, steady and warm, and invites your mind to drift. And so you do.